Hey Amarillo, I'm Jason Boyette, and you're listening to Hey Amarillo, the interview podcast featuring some of the most interesting people and stories of Amarillo, Texas. Today's guest is Carter Estes. Carter is the very first executive director of Elevate Amarillo, a nonprofit community of young professionals who come together to network, to grow professionally, and to serve the community. He's also an employee of the city of Amarillo and has served in a variety of positions there. Carter grew up in the small town Texas Panhandle. He went to Texas Tech. He got involved in politics, and he ended up getting a master's of public policy at the prestigious Harvard Kennedy School, formerly the John F. Kennedy School of Government at Harvard University. And the story of how that happened and why Carter then ended up in Amarillo after his time at Harvard is really interesting. So here's Carter Estes. Carter Estes, welcome to the Hey Amarillo podcast. Thanks for being here.
Thanks so much, Jason. I'm super excited to be here.
Good.
Really ready to talk.
I'm glad to have you. We've known each other for a few years, but I want to start with you the same way I start with all my guests, and that's just to ask why you're here in Amarillo. So what brought you to this area in the first place?
Absolutely. I mean, it's home. It's where I wanted to raise my family, and so I grew up in White Deer. Okay. I'm a Texas Panhandle guy, born and raised White Deer my entire life until I moved to Lubbock for college. And then I lived outside of Amarillo and the Texas Panhandle in Arizona and D.C. and Boston. And then I looked at my career that I had made so far after Texas Tech and after graduate school in D.C. and Boston and decided that I didn't want to raise my family in a massive city on the East Coast, that I wanted to raise them in a small place and in a place that I knew and in a place that had built me. So I wanted to move back to Amarillo.
So small place, Amarillo small, not White Deer small.
Right? Yeah, not White Deer small. Exactly. Yeah.
Tell me about growing up in White Deer. Like, were you there all the way through?
Yeah, my entire life. We moved there from Pampa when I was like 1, and my parents were from White Deer already. So it's my family had been in White Deer for years and years and years back when tornado hit it in the 40s. Yeah, so I grew up there. My family farms and ranches. My dad works in the oil field, and so I got to really live like that Texas Panhandle young kid lifestyle where, I ride my four-wheeler around town, go out and shoot rabbits on our pasture, and just got to live the small town lifestyle in White Deer. Played every sport, was in everything in high school because, that's what you do in a small town.
Yeah, for sure. It's a big deal, small towns.
Yeah.
What was your relationship to Amarillo as a kid? Did you come to town pretty often?
Oh, yeah. We'd be here once a week, twice a week, just running errands, going to the movies. Anytime you want to do anything other than buy groceries, you had to go to Amarillo because you go buy groceries in Pampa. But at Pampa, that's all they've got, the grocery store. So.
How big was your graduating class?
21 kids. Okay. 21 kids. Yeah.
Tell me about high school experience in a class in a school that size. I mean, obviously, the high school kind of is the center of activities in the town, right? I mean, the football games and stuff. What was that like?
But so, there's a lot of people I'm sure listening to this who are going to be familiar with the experiences, but everybody. I mean, it's not, and Amarillo's a pretty small town. Everybody knows everybody.
Yeah, people feel that way here, yeah.
But in White Deer, everybody. You know their first, middle, and last name. You know where they live. You know everything about the entire community. And so, my senior year in high school, I made it a point where I'm going to talk to everybody once a month in the whole school, at least. And I did that senior year because I wanted to make sure that I knew everybody, remembered everybody. It's like 90 people. It's not that hard. Yeah. And so I really liked how tight-knit of a community it is. It's not like you're friends with everybody, but you do know everybody. Right. You know everything everyone's going through. And you have the same problems you have at every high school or everything else, but there is a level of tight-knit that people have in a small town like that I think you can't really find other places. And I think that's really valuable going there. And so that's what it was like. You just know everybody. You see everybody. You get to know everyone all the time.
Plus, they know you and see you,
which
is a little bit different. You can't be invisible.
No, you can't. No, you absolutely can't.
Tell me about your plan after high school. Did you know what you wanted to do?
No, not at all. Absolutely not. My dad's side of the family, they'd never been to college. I was first generation college student on my dad's side of the family. But my mother's side of the family, they went to Texas Tech and Baylor and had been going to college for a while. And so it's kind of like, you're going to Texas Tech. That was pretty much all my family was saying you're going to go to college and you'll go to Texas Tech. And so I didn't really consider a whole lot of other places. I looked around at a couple different things, but I was like, I'm going to go to Tech, and then I don't know what I'm going to do from there. Signed up for petroleum engineering because my dad did oil field stuff. I was like, I know that. And then went to the orientation and immediately knew that is not what I was going to do. And so then I went to the College of Ag because that's where my mom went to school. And so I found ag economics. And I really, really, I don't work in agriculture right now. I work for the city and for Elevate Amarillo. And so I don't use ag economics every day, but they always tell you, and I think they tell you this for most degrees, it's the most versatile degree you can get. And so I use a lot of what I learned there. But I loved the department. I loved the people. And there was even a White Deer guy teaching in the department. So that was a big part of it.
When did you begin to get a sense of what you wanted to do after your bachelor's degree? Because I know you mentioned going to graduate school. I know you moved away and have worked in a number of different places. Like, how did that sort of clarify for you? Yeah,
so at Texas Tech was when I really started to decide that I wanted to get involved in politics and advocacy. I'd always been interested in politics just as a kid, just randomly. And so I would, watch the presidential debates when they were around or whatever. But at Texas Tech, I kind of realized that I could get way more directly involved with politics. And so, I joined student government at Texas Tech. I joined the College Republicans organization at Texas Tech, and I really invested a lot of time in the College Republicans organization. I joined the statewide organization and was the executive director for the statewide organization for 2 years. And that really, the extracurriculars at Texas Tech and being able to be involved in state politics really materially and knocking on doors, going to work on campaigns, working with local Lubbock politicians and statewide politicians made it to where my degree in ag economics, I realized every degree at Texas Tech was going to touch policy in some way. What I learned from my time at Texas Tech and in that organization, was that you can get directly involved in politics and directly involved in changing civics and changing your community. Because we worked in changing stuff in Lubbock a lot. We worked locally a lot. And so I learned that no matter what your background or your degree, you could always get involved in politics. You could always get involved in policy, and you could always find a place to really make a difference in whatever you cared about for everybody else who cares about what you care about. If you really want to work on ag policy, you care a lot about agriculture, there's thousands of other people that you're going to affect change in their lives that way.
So what did your path look like after that first degree at Tech?
So I went to Texas Tech, got that degree in ag economics, and during my time at Texas Tech, I interned for Senator Ted Cruz and Congressman Thornberry.
Okay.
On my way to intern for Senator Ted Cruz, I was in my last semester at Texas Tech. I was a senior, and I was almost certain that I was just going to go work in D.C. Like I was flying to go intern in my last semester, get my minor in political science tacked onto my degree with this internship, and then I would just stay in D.C. was my plan.
What year was this?
This was in 2019. I'd worked on Senator Cruz's 2018 campaign with Beto. I was in the West Texas stuff from Amarillo down to El Paso. And then after that, I moved it into going on the official side. And
so right after he was elected, then that second time?
Yeah. And so I went up to D.C., and on my way to D.C., I'm sitting on an airplane next to a man named Alexander Kravitz. And that's only important because he was a total stranger to me. And he's sitting there reading the Financial Times. And I asked him about an article on the front of it just to make conversation with the guy. And it was at the beginning of our plane ride from Houston to D.C. And at the end of the plane ride, the guy was like, "Have you ever considered going to graduate school?" I was like, "No, I'm not. I maybe go to the Bush School someday, but I don't really have any plans to. I'm just going to stay in D.C. and work in D.C." Well, God definitely had a different plan here because the guy said, "Well, have you considered going to Harvard?" I was like, "Absolutely not. You're an insane person."
I'm a kid from White Deer.
Yeah, right? Exactly. Yeah, I'm from White Deer. I didn't do exceptionally well at Texas Tech. I didn't do exceptionally well at White Deer. And he was like, "You should go to Harvard." And I was like, "You're a crazy guy. I'm not going to do that." And he was like, "Well, I live in D.C. Will you go have drinks with me in a couple weeks?" And I was like, "Sure." We exchanged phone numbers. Well, anyway, I go to meet him and get drinks with him. There's another guy there, and we're just chatting for like an hour. And finally, after that hour of sitting down and talking, the guy goes, "Hey, have you ever considered going to Harvard?" The new guy, the stranger. I'm like, "No, I haven't." And he goes, "Well, I'm the dean of admissions at the Kennedy School, and we want you to apply." And I was like, "Well, I haven't taken my GRE. I haven't done anything to go to graduate school." And they're like, "Just go take it, go, do that, and then apply. And we want to take a look at your application because we really enjoyed this conversation." And so I took my GRE, got my acceptance letter a couple months later, and then changed directions completely and stopped working in D.C. and moved to Boston, started going to Harvard.
What did you pursue at Harvard? What was your...
I got my master's in public policy.
Public policy. Why did those guys... What was their agenda? Like, what did they see in you? Maybe that's a wrong way to say it. But like, you have a conversation with a guy in an airplane, you have a conversation with a guy in a bar, and then you're at Harvard. Like, why did they try to steer you in that direction, do you think?
So, I mean, I worked for Senator Cruz. There's no stranger to the fact that I'm a conservative guy.
Right.
And so, that doesn't line up with what most people think about Harvard and the Ivy League. And that's certainly true. Most people there are not conservative. But something that they said they were really intentionally trying to do is they wanted to get thinking conservative students there to kind of build a small voice there and have a conservative presence on campus, because they worry about their national identity
they're
just
trying
as much
to have
as anybody
balance.
else. They don't want someone to look at Harvard and say, well, that is only liberal students go to that university. They want diversity of thought at their institution. And so they had said that they thought I'd make a good candidate, and that was one of the things they wanted me for. And so when I was at Harvard, they would always ask me, like, do you know any other conservative students you think would be, worth going here? And so, connected a few other people to that. But they were trying to be intentional about getting conservative students on campus. Now, it pretty much stopped after that. I don't think they were not welcome to having the conversation or anything else. But once they got you on campus, they could say,
what they wanted.
We've got a conservative student here. That's all
it was about building up some numbers there.
Yeah, exactly.
What was the experience there as a graduate student? Like, was it different from the undergrad experience at Harvard? Do you have a sense?
Yeah, it was. An undergrad everywhere is just a little bit more babysat, just a little bit, because you're still way younger. Like, you're just out of high school, so it's a little more structured. Where graduate school was like just completely open. You could do whatever you want. You could manage whatever projects you want. You got really close with your professors, and they just did not care if you showed up to class, because it's all on you.
Yeah.
But
they expect you to be a grown-up.
Exactly. They do. In undergrad, you're getting marks for not being at class, but they're just like, do what you want. You're an adult.
Yeah. You're paying for this.
Yeah, exactly. And so being there, it was a big deal. It was a huge honor, and I was super excited about it. I'm very grateful to have done that. Something I never imagined I would be able to do. But getting to engage with some of those professors and some of those other students who had just led way cooler lives than I ever have or ever will, and have done some really amazing stuff, I was really grateful for. And so the fact is never lost on you, on the 2 years that I was there, that your day-to-day life, you're getting to meet some of the most influential people on the planet weekly. Every week, they're bringing in some speaker who is, the foremost person at the CDC, or one of our professors, Tarek Massoud, handled diplomatic relations for the UAE and for Lebanon with the United States under that Trump deal that got us with the Middle East. And so
Abraham Accords.
Exactly, through the Abraham Accords. And so he had gotten to do a lot of hands-on work on those deals that nobody else that you're ever going to meet has gotten to do. And so you got some really cool firsthand experience getting to talk to these people, getting to work with these people.
Being someone who was invited to go there because of your politics, knowing that you were going to probably be a minority there, like, did you feel like a minority? Did you feel, I'm looking at the world differently from everybody else in this room?
Yeah, I certainly did. I definitely did. I mean, and it's just all kinds of people there. So there's some people who did not like the fact that there were conservative students at Harvard. They were very vocal about that, and they were very upset about it.
And yet, how many conservatives on the Supreme Court went to Harvard?
Exactly,
how many senators come from Harvard, on both sides of the aisle?
It's all, it's a large number of people. But there were some students who did not make it, who were not afraid to make it clear that they were uncomfortable with conservative students in the classroom. But in general, like 90% of people are just normal people. Everybody's just a normal person there. They're trying to get along just fine. And so you're working on projects with them. And a lot of people really value the insight because, they're coming from somewhere just like us. We're in a very red area. Conservatives if you live in Amarillo. But you might not know very many liberal people. But they're coming from the exact opposite. I mean, they're from Portland or New York, where they might not know a conservative person. They just haven't ever heard this other thought before, or this other side of it. So there's a lot of people that valued that.
As you went through that process, that 2 years there, did you have a goal in mind? Were you thinking, okay, once I get this degree, here's what I'm going to do?
Yeah. Oh, I thought I was totally going to move to D.C. I thought I was going to go work on the Hill in the Senate, and then I was going to, have a good legislative position there and just continue to work through that. And then I met my wife, who I met in Texas through College Republicans actually, but we reconnected, and she was still in Texas. We had a long distance relationship, our entire relationship. The closest we ever were together was when I lived in Austin and she lived in San Marcos, so we were an hour apart. And other than that, it was Phoenix to Houston and Boston to Houston and Amarillo to San Marcos, and we had a very long distance relationship. But I met my wife, and I knew that we were going to get married, and that neither of us wanted to raise a family in D.C. And neither of us wanted to raise a family in Boston. And so we started looking at alternatives, and I was like, well, I've got to find a job in Texas, and I've got to find a job either in Amarillo or Houston, because those are the two places we're going to move. That's where one of us is from. And I was definitely looking in Amarillo really hard. I was looking in Houston as well, but I wanted to move back home. And so I decided to just cast a super wide net. I reached out to all my contacts that I could in Amarillo, like, what with this degree could I do in Amarillo, which is pretty limited with a public policy master's. But I reached out to Ginger Nelson, whom I've been friends with for a number of years, and she said that they were hiring at the city. They were looking for an assistant for her. And so I was like, well, that's perfect. That's exactly what I'd like to do. I'll get to be in government, I'll get to work locally, and I'll get to move back home. And so I moved back in May of 2022 and started to work for the city of Amarillo as Mayor Nelson's assistant.
Okay.
And then I was here from then on.
Okay, so I do want to talk about that, because I would think a lot of people who get a degree in public policy from Harvard are going to have those ambitions. They want to work in D.C. They want to work for somebody in the Congress, somebody in the Senate, somebody in the executive branch. They don't think, well, I want to go back to my hometown, or at least the Texas Panhandle, and work in city government. So tell me about that thought process, because it does feel different. You're at this elite college, you're getting a degree from that elite college, and yet you go back home to work in probably one of the lowest levels of government. Tell me why, and sort of what you're able to bring to that position.
Absolutely. I think so. So the reason is because I've always been an advocate for the Texas Panhandle and for Amarillo. And so when I left the Texas Panhandle, go to school, it really struck me, even just in Lubbock, how few people knew about Amarillo or about the Texas Panhandle. And the further you get away, the less people know, and to the point where no one's ever heard of Amarillo.
Yeah, we assume that Austin forgets about us most of the time, right?
Exactly. And so, you're in other places, I was always promoting Amarillo and always talking about how great it was to grow up in White Deer, and this is what life in a town of 900 people is like, talking to someone who grew up in Manhattan, and just always talking about the exceptionalism that we can find in this area, and the people, and in the values, and in everything else we have here, and just always being an advocate for Amarillo. And so really, when I got engaged with politics early on at Texas Tech, I always knew that I wanted to advocate for Amarillo, or work for the people of Amarillo, work for the Texas Panhandle. And so when I was at Harvard, it was, how can I best do that? What can I do best? And there was a couple classes I took on local government specifically that really oriented me into that direction. Well, Amarillo, local government doesn't exist in White Deer. It exists, obviously. We've got a mayor, but it doesn't really mean anything. They take the trash, and that's about it. But in Amarillo, local government has a lot to do with people's lives, and just like every other major city in the country. And so I got to learn more at Harvard about how effectual you can be in local government, how much you can touch people's lives directly in local government and make their lives better. And I decided that was what I wanted way more than working on the federal level.
Okay.
I mean, everybody's exposure to politics is on the federal level first, because everyone knows who the president is. But it took me a long time to really see how much change could be done at the local level.
Yeah, that's the most interesting thing is, think about an election. Everybody turns out for the presidential election. Very few people are voting for Amarillo municipal elections or county commissioners or things like that. And yet those local positions are going to have probably more impact on your day-to-day life than decisions made in Washington.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. They have so much more impact on your day-to-day life, and you need to be way more involved with those. But so many people are wrapped up in national politics because it's what's on the TV, or it's what's exciting, or it's, how you can get your anger out, really. When local politics is really where you need to be spending your time and energy, because that's what matters to you. And that street outside your window is not going to get paved without city government and local politics.
So your first position with the city was as an assistant to Ginger Nelson while she was mayor. You had, I guess, a couple of years?
I was assistant to the mayor. Okay. So May 22 to May 23.
Okay. Tell me what you did in that job. What does that look like?
So I was just with Ginger day to day. I mean, it was with her schedule, going to fill in for her with meetings, making sure that we were, in Austin when we needed to be, or at a meeting in Amarillo with a business when we needed to be, or just making sure that we are advocating for Amarillo in the most effective way possible. Because that's the job of the mayor in Amarillo, because the way our city council functions and the way our city functions with the city manager government is the mayor is the number one cheerleader for the city. They've got to be promoting Amarillo. And so that was what I did for Ginger, was making sure that we were getting every possible opportunity to talk about Amarillo's wins and successes. And that was locally, regionally, at the state level, and nationally. In every opportunity we could advocate for Amarillo, because we want to see Amarillo grow. We want to see Amarillo improve. And so that was a huge part of it.
So when she decides that she was not going to run again after, I guess, in 2024, did you think, okay, there goes my job? Or like, was there, I guess, some comfort in thinking, all right, my job's going to change, but at least I'll still have one?
Yeah. No, I was comforted. I was in the city manager's office. You know, I was in the office. I was just assigned to Ginger. I had any number of projects in the city manager's office. I had a lot of other stuff to do when Ginger wasn't there. It was just when she was around or when I was working with her, I was assigned with her. And so I still had a position at City Hall, and I wasn't concerned. And we worked on what that could look like. And for a while, there was an intergovernmental affairs role that I was working for the city, where I was doing a lot of advocacy on the state level. This was during the last legislative session. And then it just continued to morph to where what I was doing in the city manager's office was managing a lot of different projects around the city. And that moved me into the Office of Engagement and Innovation, which is our old communications department, where I'm now doing project management. And I'm now managing, we're working on all kinds of projects at the city that I have just make sure people are coordinated on, which was a lot of my job under Ginger.
So it's no longer just the assistant to the mayor, because the mayor has changed. Like you've got a broader assignment at this point.
Yes.
Give me an idea beyond some of the advocacy stuff. Like, what does that look like? What kinds of special projects might you be involved with?
Yeah. So I mean, it's all kinds of stuff. Everybody knows we're getting a new City Hall. One of the things that entails is we're having to get rid of all of the phone lines underneath Old City Hall, which means we're having to switch our phone system, which means getting 2,000 employees all understanding that we're moving to a new system, getting all their phones installed, getting everything else. So I manage that schedule. I make sure that the departments are scheduled when they need to be, that there's no hiccups or anything like that. And that's for a number of things. That's for any software implementation we have, for any phone implementation we have. But then there's other projects that departments are working on. They may be getting a new software. We may be working on a citywide thing like our new website design. And so that's something where you have to touch every department, make sure all the information is correct. And it's a very detailed, in-depth process. And so that's what I've been doing, is just touching base, making sure every department is pointed in the right direction. And if there are issues, connecting people with the right people to get them fixed. So
I want to ask a question. This may be an odd question, but I feel like you're pretty well positioned to think about it. You worked very closely with Ginger during her administration. Now Cole Stanley is the mayor. You talk about sort of the role of the mayor, which we've thought about as being sort of a weak mayor role, because the city council makes most of the decisions. City manager has a lot of power. As someone who's worked under two different mayors, like, does the mayor's personality or the culture they bring to it, does it change anything at the city level? Like, does it matter for you in your day-to-day if Ginger Nelson is the mayor or if Cole Stanley is the mayor? Or is it just, you've got the work to do, you keep doing that work regardless of who's sitting in that seat?
Yeah, it's a lot about the work to do. I mean, everybody, no matter who's the mayor, they want your trash picked up on time. They want to make sure that the streets are safe for you to be out on. They want to make sure that we're living in a safe community. They want to make sure that all of our city services are being provided. So there's a lot of day-to-day stuff that's the exact same. It's a lot of vision casting is the difference. It's just a lot of the direction you want to see, because, the city is a giant ship. It's a cruise ship, and you cannot turn a cruise ship on a dime. And so when you elect a new mayor, you're setting the vision not just for the next 2 years, but for a few years after that, because it's hard to change the direction of that ship. And so the day-to-day is all the exact same. It's just really the direction the city is moving. You can start to slowly see course corrections and course adjustments, but it doesn't affect any city employee day-to-day, it doesn't feel like.
Okay, I also want to talk about maybe your second job. I don't know how you view it, but you're still working full-time for the city, but you're also the new executive director for Elevate Amarillo.
Yep.
Which is a nonprofit kind of focused on, well, you can describe what it's focused on, but young professionals group. And you are the first official employee of Elevate Amarillo.
First ever staff member.
Tell me what it is and tell me what you do as the first staff member.
Yeah, absolutely. So Elevate Amarillo is an organization that I've been involved with since 2022, and it's been around since 2019. And it exists to also kind of help orient Amarillo's future. There's a lot of future-orienting enterprises in Amarillo. You have the city council, you have the EDC, you have our other elected officials, you have large businesses in town. You have a bunch of different groups that want to see Amarillo grow and that have unified visions or maybe slightly different visions of where that wants to go. Elevate's another one of those. We want to make sure that Amarillo has leadership into the future throughout many years to come. We want to get young professionals and emerging leaders in Amarillo, and we want to train them on skills in leadership, in professional development, in networking, and making meaningful connections with people, to where when there's a new spot open on the city council or on the parks board at the city, or when Heal the City needs a new board member, or when any of these organizations around town that do exceptionally important work need somebody with skills to fill those roles, not just a warm body, we've created those people with skills. We've fostered and spent a lot of time investing in our emerging leaders in our community so they're ready to take on those roles and not have to spend 2 or 3 years understanding what board service is like, or getting involved, or getting up to speed on what this organization does. They're ready to get in there and do the work immediately to continue to keep these organizations running and keep Amarillo's future on the right track.
Okay. One of the common, I wouldn't say it's a complaint, but one of the common concerns within the nonprofit world is that the board members are all the same board members, on all the boards, because it tends to be people who are further in their career, so they've got a little bit more time. Maybe they don't have young kids at home. Maybe they're not trying to build a career. And so you end up with like a lot of retired people serving on boards. A lot of the older donor class serving on boards. Every board wants young people.
Right.
And yet there's not always, like you said, the young people who are either prepared to be in that place or have the time, flexibility to be in that place. And so I know it's a significant problem. I appreciate that Elevate is working to address it, but there's still some challenges. It would be hard as a young professional to be on the city council. It's hard to be on a board that's going to meet maybe in the middle of the day, or that's going to take you away from your family. So what are some of the conversations that you guys are having at Elevate to try to solve that problem?
Yeah. Well, it's really, really important to get it across to people that the things we're asking you to do are part of your family and they're part of your career, because we need Amarillo to succeed for your family to grow and for your family to flourish and for your kids to have opportunities in the future that you had provided for you, or that you maybe didn't have provided for you in Amarillo. And that the business that you're running or the business that you're working for is going to need to find new customers, and they're going to need to continue to grow. And that's only going to happen if Amarillo continues to grow and is pointed in the right direction. So a big part of training, especially emerging leaders, because when you're young and you have a new family or you just bought a house, you've got a lot of things on your mind, and it is not the direction of the community in 20 years from now. Exactly. That's not something you're thinking about. And so a lot of what we do is we have to spend time educating a bunch of young leaders and emerging professionals on how you have to be thinking about that now, because if we're not thinking about it now, then in 20 years, we're going to look up and say, well, there's a problem. No one was thinking about this 20 years ago, and it was our responsibility to do so. So there's a lot of basically training is what is involved, where we have a program called Foundations, where you kind of get put through the gamut of civics and nonprofits here in Amarillo, and you learn all about all the different ones and what it's like to serve on a board and just the responsibilities and time management. One of the things that a lot of ambitious emerging leaders will find is that you're way overcommitted. You're spread super thin, because it's 85% of those boards are all the same donor class. The 15% is all the same 20-year-olds and 30-year-olds who are spreading themselves way too thin. And so you have to learn time management. That's another thing we try to teach people and Elevate and try to have programs about, is that you can get burned out super easily. And so you should not be serving on 6 boards. You should be serving on 2 boards that you care a lot about. And then you need to be making it clear to those boards, and you need to be in leadership roles on those boards on, this is how, we most effectively do this to where I can be involved and still be with my family. And this is how we hold these meetings, and this is how we need to do it. And just changing the culture for emerging leaders from not caring about the future right now because they've got so much on their mind, to adding that and really just working it in and finding a responsibility, finding their comfortable amount of responsibility, basically. Yeah.
Are you surprised that you've ended up here in these 2 different roles?
Yeah, I'm a little bit surprised. I don't think 10 years ago I would have thought that, but I'm really, really happy to have done it. I mean, I feel like I get to work as closely with the community in Amarillo as I could possibly hope in both of these roles, and in really, really different ways.
Yeah.
And so it's been really rewarding.
But in ways that are influential. I mean, it's the kind of thing where we think so much about national politics, but like, it's going to be hard for me to have an impact on what's happening in Washington. But like, I can have an impact on what's happening in Amarillo. You can have an impact through Elevate or through your projects at the city. Like, those touch people's lives. And so it feels like in a smaller pond like this, the impact is a little bit bigger.
Yeah, no, it absolutely is. You get to see the ripples and effects way faster, way more directly, and sometimes you even get to talk to the individuals that you've helped or that you've helped change. I've got a few people who they called the mayor's office when I was working for Ginger to ask about a question, and now it's just I'm their speed dial for problems at the city, and I don't have any problem with that at all, because I know that they are comfortable that if they have an issue, whether there's something wrong with their curb or their business needs something or whatever it is, that they can just call me instead of having to sift through the website or call a 301 number, and I can just help point them in the right direction. And that's like the number one most rewarding thing about what I do, is getting to have those individual connections and knowing that I can help someone who's a stranger, basically, to now get whatever was bothering them that day completely resolved.
This episode of Hey Amarillo is supported by Lazy Boy Home Furnishings here in Amarillo. You probably know Lazy Boy is a national brand, but its Amarillo store is independently owned and operated by the Hawkins family, and they live right here in town. And here's the thing, they offer a lot more than just recliners, the recliners that you think of when you think of the name Lazy Boy. Amarillo's locally owned Lazy Boy Home Furnishings has a ton of different products in stock, ready for you to take home or deliver today. So go visit the Lazy Boy of Amarillo showroom at 3636 Soncy. That's Lazy Boy of Amarillo, 3636 Soncy. Okay, I'm back with Carter Estes. Carter, this is the part of the show I call 8 Straight. 8 Straight is sponsored every week by Panhandle Plains Historical Museum in Canyon. It's the largest history museum in Texas, and its collection includes the double-barreled shotgun used by President Teddy Roosevelt on his 1909 African safari. The story behind how that ended up at Panhandle Plains is a really interesting one. You can find it at the museum. He told friends that that gun was the finest and most beautiful gun he'd ever seen. But you can see it in Canyon. So learn more about that at panhandleplains.org. Okay, when you think about Amarillo 10 years from now, what do you hope for?
So all of these questions, you sent these questions beforehand. I had to think really hard about all of them. And there's a couple on them on here you're going to be like, wow, you had to think really hard about that? I definitely did, because they're all great questions.
I'm glad you did your homework then.
I did. And so there's a lot of stuff that I hope for the future of Amarillo. But I've got to say the thing I hope the most is that we maintain our identity, our unique identity. Mm-hmm. Amarillo is growing a ton. Everybody knows that. I'm not the first person on Hey Amarillo to say those words, that Amarillo is growing, but it is. And that's a great thing. We can't sit here and keep Amarillo exactly the same without any level of growth. That's just not going to happen. Right. There's no way to stand athwart history, yell stop, and say no more growth in Amarillo because we don't want it to change.
Because then you start declining, and that's change too. And it's a bad kind of change. Exactly.
Yeah, a terrible kind of change. Yeah. And so, or you just have this uncontrolled growth because you say, I don't want to manage it. And so now the growth's unmanageable, doing whatever you want. I want to see us really be intentional about the growth in Amarillo. And not that we haven't been. I think we have been for a number of years. And I think that that's served our community really well. And I want to see us continue in that direction. And so looking at the culture that we have in Amarillo, why do people want to live here? It's because we have family values and Christian values, and we have a Western heritage identity, and we have an emerging international food identity. We have a lot of identities in Amarillo that we want to maintain because they're really great identities and they're really great values. And so we have to be intentional about the businesses that we're bringing to Amarillo, about the workforce that we want in Amarillo, about the direction that the city is growing. And so I hope that we're going to continue this growth trend and that our growth trend is going to expand. And I hope that throughout that growth, we have people in the community in 10 years who are going to be really intentional and really mindful about the businesses and about the things we want in Amarillo and about the direction we want to grow.
Okay. Other than wind, what does this area have too much of?
This one, so there's like a lot of cliche answers, I think, like coffee shop and convenience store. I'm sure you hear all the time. I'm sure you hear those all the time. That's like a problem everywhere. And so one of the things that I feel like is more of a problem in Amarillo is I feel like we have so many vape stores everywhere.
That must be a really good business to be in because every new store that opens, if it's not a convenience store, it's like a vape store.
Yes, exactly. And that's a big part of my generation. Everybody, it feels like in my
I blame you
generation
for
vapes.
that. You and your cohort.
Exactly. I don't vape, and I don't want as many vape stores around because they've got these garish neon signs always, and there's like no regulation about where they can be. There are some that I've always thought seem really close to schools. I'm like, there should be some reason they're not there. But anyways, vape stores, I'd love to see those diminish.
That's okay. What does this area not have enough of?
This area does not have enough, and this is going to surprise a lot of people when I say that, but restaurants.
Okay.
We have a ton of awesome restaurants in town, and we have a ton of great Mexican food, but there's still some culinary gaps in Amarillo that we just don't have filled. Like, we don't have a German restaurant. We don't have a Jewish restaurant. We don't have like a Jewish deli. That was the thing when I lived in Boston or in DC that I missed the most about living on the East Coast was I just can't find any great pastrami in Amarillo. I have to make my own pastrami at home because it's so great on the East Coast, and we're missing a couple key cuisines.
We don't have a kebab place. Really.
No kebab. Yeah, exactly. And so Mediterranean food is like completely gone. There's a bunch of places I'd like to see.
All right. What's your favorite local neighborhood?
My favorite local neighborhood. This is a great question because my wife and I are shopping for a house right now. We just met with our realtor last week, so we're looking at a lot of neighborhoods. And
what a time to shop for a house!
Yeah,
right?
I know. Hopefully the FHA interest rate's a little better. Anyways, we are looking at Bivens, namely because of how family oriented that neighborhood is and how unique the houses are. Pretty much our only criteria on a house is we don't want a new build. We'd like an old build, and so Bivens is a neighborhood that I've been spending a lot of time in, just driving around looking at houses, and I'm really, really liking it. And it
really
looks like
unique houses, a lot of different sizes.
Yeah, it's a really, as far architecturally diverse neighborhood.
Okay, what's your favorite local restaurant?
So this one took a lot of thinking too, but this is probably the one I spend the most time at is Oishi over by Market Street.
Yeah, a relatively new sushi place. It's been around for a year or two, maybe.
Yeah, exactly. I ate my birthday there. I like it so much. They've got this fatty salmon there that I love. We've gotten to know the owner, James, pretty well. He's Laotian originally, and he cares a ton about his food. He cares so much about what people think about, specifically the sushi there.
Right.
And so I plug Oishi every time I can. When my wife's dad comes in from Houston, we eat there every time. It's his favorite restaurant in Amarillo.
One of the best sushi places in town. And that's one of those forms of restaurants that has grown a lot in Amarillo in the past 20 years. Like when I was your age, there was no sushi in Amarillo at all. And so it's been fun to kind of see these different places come in, and Oishi is one of the best.
Yeah,
so,
it's great.
Other than Elevate, what's your favorite local nonprofit?
So it's the other nonprofit I'm involved in. I got involved through Elevate because this was one of the nonprofits that reached out. We wanted a younger person on the board. And so I became the president of the Panhandle Orphan Care Network in May. And we are an organization that helps foster families in the Texas Panhandle. This organization has been really, really amazing to be a part of because before I was involved with it, I got involved specifically because one, I felt called that I needed to be involved with some form of ministry, and this was a ministry I wanted to be involved with. And then also that I didn't have any exposure to the foster system whatsoever. Growing up, I didn't even think I knew another foster kid, or not a foster kid. And so I didn't know really anything about it. So I wanted to learn more about it. And like I said, I've been involved since May, or I've been the president since May, and working with Matt Dara over there has been amazing. What the organization's main focus is we take packages to foster families that just got a foster kid, usually in the first 24 hours, because it takes about a month for them to get reimbursed by the state on expenses. There's a limit on those, but a lot of these placements are like emergency placements. And so these kids don't have anything. They don't have any clothes. They don't have any hygiene products. And so this organization, for around $400, is able to give these kids a bag and a small wardrobe and a toy and a Bible and a blanket and anything else that the family requests that may be needed, like a car seat, for example. And so I've gotten to deliver a couple of these care packages myself, and seeing the relief and how grateful these parents are who are overwhelmed because it is the first 24 hours of this brand new kid they just got. To see the relief that these packages gives them is amazing. I mean, it's a huge blessing. I'm happy to get to be involved, and it's a great nonprofit. Okay.
You live here very intentionally because you chose to come back. What's the most underrated aspect, you think, of living in this area?
So, again, I thought a lot about all these questions. underrated is like the operative word here, because there's a lot of really great stuff about this area.
And people know it's great, right?
Exactly. And so when I was working with Ginger, one of the projects we did was a 100 business tour. We did 100 businesses, and we just interviewed the owners. And one of the questions was, what do you like the most about living in Amarillo? And out of 100, over 80 of them said the exact same thing, which was the people.
Okay.
And so I'm not going to say the people, because that feels like it's properly rated.
Right.
It feels like people know.
It's the right amount of rating.
We've got the right people here. And so what really a big underrated part of living in Amarillo is how quick you can be nowhere. How quick you can get in the middle of nowhere.
Okay.
I'm from White Deer, so I like my space sometimes. Yeah. And so, like when we had the Aurora Borealis, my wife and I drove 15 minutes north and could see it perfectly. Out of the city, no light pollution, anything like that. And so being able to access nature that quickly is something that I experienced not being able to do living in DC and Boston, and now value way more. Just being able to go outside, being able to ride a dirt bike, being able to go to the lake 45 minutes away and not really have to worry too much about getting everything together and just being able to get there. And just being able to spontaneously be in nature is something that Amarillo affords me the opportunity to do that other places I've lived haven't. Okay.
Last question. When was the last time you visited the Big Texan?
Yeah, I loved this question. More recent than I thought. Since my wife's family is from Houston, anytime we get a new family member who'd never been to Amarillo, we have to go to the Big Texan. They insist. They say, I have to eat there. And I'm always like, are you sure? Yeah. And then we go anyway. And so I have been to the Big Texan within the year. We took Cassidy's mom there, but we gave her a special treat. I've got a buddy whose name is Cy, who I went to high school with in White Deer. He was on the football team with me. And he went and ate the 72-ounce steak there for her mom.
You were there.
Yeah, just so we could see it.
He did it just so you
Yeah. And
how did he do?
He missed it by like 6 ounces. So
that's
sadly,
pretty impressive.
Yeah, he got close.
66-ounce steak then, I guess.
Yeah, it was the first time I'd seen someone eat the steak, though. I'd never seen it before. So, yeah, it was impressive.
Good. Well, I mean, I guess that's a strategy. If you know you're going to go there and take somebody, you also have to bring somebody to do the challenge, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, that concludes the 8 straight questions. I like to close by asking my guests to endorse something. So what's one thing you would like local people to know about or to experience?
Man, this is something that was actually kind of easy for me, because I feel like a lot of people don't know about this, and I want more people to know about it. Amarillo College has a bookstore on campus that is like amazing. It's managed by a guy named Andrew Flores, who used to work for Hastings. And so if you miss the old Hastings coffee shop, it exists here in town. And so if you want that experience, go to the Amarillo College bookstore. They've got like board games and they've got great coffee. And
not just
everything.
Textbooks there.
No,
right?
It's not just textbooks. They're an Apple dealer, actually. If you need an Apple product, I think you can go there. But
I didn't know that.
Yeah. I've had a great time just sitting there working at that coffee shop, because it's good coffee, good people, and it's kind of got that old Hastings vibe.
Tell listeners where it's located on campus.
It is, so it's called the Badger Central Bookstore. It's across from the library, like smack in the middle of campus, between catty corner from PBS.
Yeah. Where Commons is there? Is that in the middle?
Yes.
That's the main
Where
Commons area.
Yeah. I didn't go to AC, so I'm not. I don't know exactly.
Okay. Carter Estes, thank you so much for being on the podcast. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Jason.
And that concludes the episode. I want to say thanks to Carter for the interview. You can learn more about Elevate at elevateamarillo.org. Thanks also to Lazy Boy of Amarillo and Panhandle Plains Historical Museum for supporting the podcast, and to Angelina Marie for editing every week. Thank you for listening. I appreciate it. I'm glad you're here. Hey Amarillo exists on a weekly basis because of listeners like you and the local people who support it financially through patreon.com/HeyAmarillo. Hey Amarillo's executive producers include Barbara and Jim Witten, Wes Reeves, Josh Wood, Cindy Graham, Corey Burns, Jason Burr, Katie Linger, and Patrick Burns. This has been episode 384. My name is Jason Boyett, and I'll see you next week.